So here we are just 5 days before the most high stakes and the most tense US presidential election anybody can remember. And I just spoke to Stephen Moore, the senior economic advisor to Donald Trump, a man who in his own past has been very much a Reaganite, a low tax, supply side economist, and yet who now supports the program of a candidate that departs from many of those orthodoxies on trade, immigration, and elsewhere. I asked Moore how it is he could reconcile his philosophy with Trump's very different approach to economics.
I think in a lot of ways, Donald Trump is a small government conservative. Not completely, but I'll mention two or three. I was one of the architects of his tax plan. We believe this is one of the biggest tax cuts since Ronald Reagan, and we believe it will put a lot of juice in the economy, getting those taxes down on American workers and businesses. So that's one of the heart of the Trump plan. Second of all, as you know, Obamacare has been a huge issue in the last few weeks in this campaign, and Trump has, I think quite correctly, said we're going to get rid of Obamacare and move to something more market-based, which I totally agree with. And a third one is energy policy, which I've worked with Trump on, and I believe if we develop our fossil fuel resources in this country, we can become the next Saudi Arabia with huge amounts of oil and gas and coal. And so on those things, I am in complete agreement with them. Now, I've said many times that I don't entirely agree with Donald Trump on trade. I'm a free trade guy. I go back to Adam Smith. You know, he taught us that when you have voluntary exchange between two parties, both of them are better off. But I don't entirely disagree with him. I do think that, you know, when it comes to countries like China, I think it is clear that what we produce in America more and more is intellectual property. You're in the intellectual property game. I am. You know, we produce drugs and vaccines and computer software, and we send that stuff to China, and they do steal it from us. And I think having a tougher negotiator like Donald Trump, who wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, might actually help America.
Two things on that. First, the trade thing. To say that you disagree with him on that, but the rest of the agenda you're with, it's a bit like saying that you support Hillary Clinton except on equal women's rights. I mean, it's such a huge part of Donald Trump's message, the trade war, the massive tariffs on NAFTA. How can you sort of tiptoe around that boulder, as it were?
Well, one of the things that Larry Kudlow and I have done, and Larry's another guy who I've worked with very prominently, is one of the points we made to Donald Trump is, look, if we fix the regulatory state and get some of these regulations off of our businesses and fix our tax system where we're actually not penalizing our manufacturers, but actually you know, putting them on a level playing field with other countries, that a lot of those jobs and companies that you want to come back to the United States will. And I happen to believe that to be true. I think a lot of those trade problems are a result of a very heavy-handed regulatory structure and a tax system where we do one of the dumbest things in the world. We tax what we produce, but we don't tax what's imported. So we actually put our domestic producers at a disadvantage.
Okay, a slightly larger question. You mentioned The Art of the Deal, Trump's bestseller from the 80s. Now, this is all about him, as presidential campaigns always are, but even more, this is about him than that he's the guy who'll make America win again. He is the guy who can do deals. Everyone else is stupid. And the system is rigged. Now, if a democratic system is rigged, you want to unrig it. And if he alone is the only person who can do it, you must be signing up to that element of his campaign. What is it about him that you believe in?
Well, I'll tell you a story because, I disagree a little bit with the premise of the question. I actually think this is a lot larger than Donald Trump, and I think he actually, you know, recognized this, that this is a movement. He really, truly has created a political movement that even people like you and me who follow politics all the time didn't quite see, that there was a mass middle-class, working-class America that felt that Washington was ignoring them and was completely inattentive to their economic anxieties and fears. And whether Trump wins or loses this election, I think he will win. But even if he loses, I think this movement that he has created is not going away. Hillary is going to have to deal with, you know, a huge segment of the population that is extremely economically anxious. They're financially stressed out. And I would even make the case it's part of a bigger culture war in this country between left and right.
So you think
I'm on his side in this culture. I've become actually a more, even just being around him and especially the people. I mean, the first meeting I had with Donald Trump, I said to Donald, because I had been to one of his rallies, and I talked to the people there, and they were construction workers and school teachers and veterans and soccer moms and blacks and whites and Hispanics, people on motorcycles.
Lots of blacks there?
There were blacks there, you'd be surprised. And what was so interesting about it, when talking to these folks, they really did feel that both parties had betrayed them. And so I just think this is an important movement that people are discounting and underestimating, even if he loses.
No, I appreciate that. But another point on where I think you should disagree or would disagree with him is the Reagan tax cuts. He was against them. You see them as one of the big supply side positives of the last generation.
I've never seen him. I need documentation of that.
He was against them at the time, very strongly on the record.
We all learn over time. Look, there are a lot of people against the Reagan tax cuts, and the truth is that, you know, if you look back now and you look at the evidence, and I've written a book on this, and you know, it looks like it was a huge success with respect to jobs, with respect to the stock market, with respect to economic revival, and boy, do we need that now. I happen to think that if Donald Trump wins this election, I've said this on other networks, I'll say it to you, I really believe if we put in place Trump's economic plan, we can get 4% economic growth for over 5 years.
Couple of final questions. One is that this week 370 economists, including all the Nobel Prize winners in economics, said this is magical thinking.
What is?
The Trump's 4% growth, the trade strategy like this, it's the Trump's economic program. Now, there isn't an accredited former Council of Economic Advisors, economist for any Republican administration who's actually supporting Trump.
Well, look,
all the experts
I mean, this is an important point. First of all, I don't know who all these economists are, but many of...
You've seen the list.
Okay.
It's a letter.
Well, let me put it like this. I think most of those economists on that list supported what Barack Obama did in 2009 with this massive economic stimulus plan.
Oh no, this is Greg Mankiw, Glenn Hubbard. These are people who've worked in Republican administrations.
But there are hundreds of economists. We have lists of hundreds of economists who've actually said that they do think that this is going to work. Now, let me say this.
Could you share those lists?
I will. I'll show you to you. So, I wrote a book on this. If you look at what people were saying in 1979 and 1980 about what Ronald Reagan wanted to do, they said it will send the United States economy into depression. It will never work. They're never going to get. Ronald Reagan will never be able to get inflation.
But a lot supported Reagan.
They were wrong.
But a lot supported him. Here, it's everybody opposed to Trump. There isn't an accredited economist.
This is a bit of the intelligentsia against the look. This is the ruling class versus the working class.
But aren't you a member of the ruling class?
I don't want to be.
Wasn't Donald Trump born into the ruling class? Wasn't he born very, very wealthy?
There are a lot of times in history, and I think this is one of them, where the conventional wisdom was wrong. We've seen this so many times in history. I think what made Reagan a great economist and economically successful is he took on the conventional wisdom of Keynesian economics. Said, no, let's cut taxes to get the economy moving again.
And
you know, you go back
to free trade,
of course,
and immigration.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And look, I believe immigration is so important to this country. That's my own view. But I also believe that in some ways Donald Trump is right. There's always elements of truth to what Donald Trump is saying. I do think if we're going to maintain the kind of political consensus in this country for an open immigration system where we let, you know, the hardest working people and the best and talented people come to this country, it's simply a political reality, whether you and I like it or not, that until the American people feel that that border is secure, we are not going to see that political consensus. So what I've gotten Trump to say, and this is, you know, one of the things I feel is my role in working with Trump, is to try to push him at least as much as I can in the right direction. So, and he's used this expression at least to say, look, Donald, I will back you on your wall if you will back me on saying that this wall is going to have big gates so people can come in legally.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, Steve.